All right, it is 11:30 a.m. and we are going to go ahead and get started. Good morning, everyone. My name is Allison Tombros Korman. I'm the Senior Director here at Culture of Respect, and I'm so excited to be joined today by Dr. Penny Rue, the Vice President for Campus Life at Wake Forest University. For those of you who are just joining us, again, not to worry, you're not late, you're right on time. All that you've missed is that we are going to let you know that if you have a video camera and you can turn it on and you're comfortable with that, please go ahead and do so, just so we can feel kind of more like we're all in the same room together. And we're going to run through some more tech instructions in just a second. But first and foremost, I want to say how welcome and honored we are to have Dr. Penny Rue joining us for this conversation. Dr. Rue is the NASPA Board Chair and the Vice President for Student Life at Wake Forest University. I'm sure many of you know her name and face through her amazing work at NASPA. All right, with that, we're going to jump into our content, which I think is why folks are here today. I want to make it, make us feel like we are having a conversation, even if it's through technology. So please feel free to use the chat function as Cerise described to engage with speakers and with each other. And as Cerise also mentioned, we will take questions kind of during this, so it does feel like we're getting to chat with each other, and we'll hopefully have some time at the end for questions as well. And kind of just to set the stage for why we're having this conversation, I think it's no surprise to any of us here on the call today that individuals and institutions are really struggling to find their place in this larger effort to end sexual violence. And I think we're especially pleased to have Dr. Rue here to discuss this issue, given the leadership that she, her staff, and Wake Forest University have shown kind of on a large scale on these issues. So from her national level seat, Dr. Rue is, as I mentioned, the NASPA Board Chair. So that's kind of how she's able to affect change at a national level. She also comes to this work institutionally. We've had the good fortune of working with Dr. Rue and her team for the last 2 years through the Culture of Respect Collective, which is the program that Cerise and I run here at NASPA. And it's a 2-year program that leads institutions through a process of self-assessment and targeted organizational change. And we're going to talk today a little bit throughout the conversation about what higher ed's role is in ending this sexual assault problem on campus by talking about how Wake Forest has kind of embraced this through the collective and through the activities they've done there. And lastly, Dr. Rue comes to this work personally. She has just been a champion and possibly one of the most eloquent speakers I've ever heard on this topic when she talks about kind of how it impacts her students and her campus. So we are just really honored to have you here today. Thank you, Dr. Rue.
Thanks, it's great to be with you.
Great. Well, I want to start kind of in a simple place. So this problem of sexual violence in this country, it undoubtedly feels, I'm sure to many of us, large and overwhelming and kind of hard to know where to start taking action. So could you talk to us a little bit about maybe a personal experience in your work there at Wake Forest that really helps remind us that this work, we do it because it matters to individuals?
Yeah, thanks for that prompt, Allie. I'm actually going to go back a little further before my time at Wake Forest by an issue that was brought to mind in the past couple of weeks, given what's going on nationally. And that is, we had a person come forward after more than 20 years after an assault and want to hold her perpetrator responsible, and was actually able to do so through the court system. And so it reminded me that these issues really do cast a very long shadow and have implications for someone's life for a very long time.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're seeing a lot of that as we hear people kind of inspired by what they've seen on the national stage recently come forward and share these stories. And speaking of that national stage, which has been extremely active over these last couple weeks, our country has just come through this really difficult and challenging national conversation about sexual violence and survivorship and these long-term effects. So I'm curious to know kind of what messages or lessons you've taken away from these really charged events, and any just any lessons that you'd like to share with all of us.
Well, I think for most of us, it's been hard to care passionately about the issue and watch it unfold on the national scene. But I think there are probably several of us on this call today who are old enough to have been glued to the Anita Hill hearing back in the 90s. And I can't tell you how disappointing it is to see how little progress has been made in a place like the Senate Judiciary Committee, while private corporations and colleges have made remarkable progress on this issue. And especially troubling for me were the president's words suggesting that if it had really happened, she and her family would have reported it to the police. Now, very quickly, a hashtag formed on Twitter, "Why I Didn't Report." And you might not think of Twitter as the place to go for social science research, but I will tell you what emerged with that hashtag is a textbook sample of the many reasons that victims of sexual assault, both men and women, don't come forward. And it just underscored for me how important our prevention efforts really are.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I think hearing everything we know about why survivors don't report kind of cast into doubt was really painful for those of us who understand that this can be a long time coming and why that is.
That's right.
Yeah. So kind of you spoke in your comments just a second ago about the progress that higher education and private entities have made because they've had a little bit of this leeway to kind of act independently. So now that we're at this moment where we've come through this really difficult conversation and we're kind of at the precipice of something kind of maybe new, what do you think the role of institutions of higher education and student affairs professionals can be in this moment? What do you think that we can contribute?
Well, I do think when a moment like this happens, when sexual assault is vaulted into the national discourse, we absolutely need to seize those opportunities to shed light on this pernicious problem. And I would say, despite what we saw in the Senate, we have seen a sea change in support for survivors coming forward to seek services. I think the cloud of shame for many victims, which prevents people from coming forward, is being lifted by this larger national discourse. And so I think we really need to take advantage of those opportunities. Once people realize how pervasive sexual assault, sexual harassment, stalking, domestic violence are, I think they realize it's not about what they did or didn't do, and there's more of a liberation. So I think it's very important for universities to step forward. I'm sure many of your campuses have had little speak outs or lunch and learns to lean into this moment, having students really grapple with what they're seeing on the national stage and relating it to their own lives.
Yeah, you bring up a great point. A question I was going to ask, which is, how has this impacted your students? What, how has the dynamic on your campus changed over the last couple weeks or months or even years as there's been kind of a growing awareness about sexual violence?
You talked about the Me Too movement, and so really going back a year ago and thinking about that bright light that has gotten shown on it. It just reminds me that it's more important than ever that we prevent sexual assault and really serve those who've been assaulted. So I think about this work, we often think about it within the Title IX framework, for example, but I know, and I'm sure many of the colleagues I'm speaking to now began to work on this issue long before Title IX was linked to sexual assault. Because we really care about our students' experiences. And, in our campus, in the most recent data that we have, 14% of our incoming women and 4% of our incoming men have already experienced unwanted sexual contact, just walking in the door. So as an educator, knowing, again, it casts a long shadow, I'm thinking, are these students in the best position they could be in to learn, to form healthy relationships? What can we do to support them? And so it's not just about what happens here. It's a larger societal problem that we inherit. But I do find that more and more students are now capable challenging that discourse, of challenging the informal rules between men and women about sexual decision making. And I'm hopeful about that work.
Yeah, that's a great point. Cerise and I just had the opportunity to go visit a K-12 public system last week that we do some of our work with. And I think one thing that was a bright moment for us was seeing this young group of students, high school students, who had formed their own student activist club and were deciding kind of what they wanted to focus their activism on. And these students were ready to take it on. They were not scared, and I was really relieved and inspired to see that. So I agree. There's a lot of things happening before students even walk onto our campuses that we need to make sure we're thinking about, and in tailoring our prevention efforts appropriately for them.
I agree.
So I guess another question that brings me to is, this has been a long process. This has been kind of an ongoing effort to kind of broaden our efforts around sexual violence. And we've done a lot, and we've made a lot of progress, but sexual violence is not going away anytime yet that we can tell. So what's it going to take if it's not going to take what we've done so far, and it's not going to take the national conversation? What is it going to take if we're going to make a dent here?
It's such a good question, and I do think of this as a generational issue as well. I formed my first sexual assault working group back in the early 90s, and we recognized then we needed to take a more systems approach, because before it had just been counselors in our counseling center that were working with it. And so I'll tell you, that's actually why we at Wake Forest joined the second class of the Culture of Respect 2 years ago. I didn't press my Title IX colleague or my advocates into joining. I just asked them to take a look at the program, and I said to them that I'd fund it if they thought it could add value. And the truth is, they were really excited about the opportunity because it would make their work so much easier, and it has. So what Culture of Respect has done for us is it provides what I think of as an enabling structure that really allows us to attract and include campus partners. We had a 12-person sexual misconduct policy and prevention group before. It's now a 60-person strong collaborative, and because Culture of Respect gives you these 6 pillars that really help you break down the work into its component parts. And perhaps more importantly for us, they have given our student activists really concrete and specific ways to work for change. And they're doing so with members of the faculty and administration, so it's really helping to build trust. So, it's not this work is never done, as you say, partly because we always have a new generation of students coming in, but having a really firm framework has been very helpful to us.
Good. I'm glad to hear that, and I appreciate that everyone on your campus is always striving to do more. That they're never kind of willing to say, okay, we've done what we need to do. They're always kind of striving to think about what they can do next. So we had a couple of questions from folks on the call, and we're gonna bear with us. We're gonna try some tech edginess here. We're gonna unmute Emmeline, and you had a question for Dr. Rue. If you're off mute, maybe you can go ahead and pose it yourself. If not, I'll go ahead and do it for you, but let's see if this works.
Did it work?
I think so.
Yeah. Yeah. Good morning, Penny.
Leah Murphy.
Like separate from us.
So this is now the 3rd campus that I've been on where our activist students, and I'm really glad to hear that the Culture of Respect gives our students concrete ways to frame their organizing. But oftentimes, what I met with are demands for things that are primarily centered around survivor support. And so I'm just wondering, how have you had to navigate resource priorities between what you say is it's important to prevent sexual assault, so that's the primary prevention part, and survivor support when when students are asking for a list of things that primarily center around survivor support.
Yeah, thank you, Emmeline, and it's great to see you. We're old colleagues from UC San Diego, so it's wonderful to see your face. You know, even though I talk about the importance of prevention, I don't really put that above survivor support. I really think of them as co-equal. I mean, the reason prevention is so important is because every issue, every incident of sexual assault that we prevent is another life that's able to stay on track, and so that's crucial. But we have doubled our survivor support services, partly because, as I mentioned before, of what's coming in the door for us. And so, you know, they're equally important, to be honest. And I will tell you that it's actually, being a part of the Culture of Respect has helped us to recruit both survivor support and also just counselors in our counseling center, because they understand they're joining a campus with a commitment to doing this work in a progressive way.
Thank you.
Sorry, got myself off mute. Thank you so much for that question. I'm glad we were able to do that. We had a question in the chat that folks were interested in a little bit more information about the collective that Penny's been speaking about. And I will definitely speak to that a bit at the end. And we will follow up with some information by email, and folks can reach out to me directly. But it has been a wonderful opportunity to work with Dr. Rue and the folks at Wake Forest. So I'm very grateful for that opportunity. Just kind of thinking about what you all have done on your campus, Dr. Rue. I mean, this work is never easy, and it's never stress-free. So can you maybe share with us an experience about one of your greatest institutional challenges at Wake Forest, whether it's something that you've overcome or you're still working through? But I think we need to be transparent with folks that this work is real and it's challenging. So maybe you could tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I think a challenge that we all face is that we know there are more incidents of sexual assault than we ever hear about, either from the support side or from the adjudication side. I will say that having a large collective and having a group of people who work on these issues together has, we have had an increase in both people seeking support and people seeking to go through the formal process. And I think that's because of the transparency that has been created through the Culture of Respect, and so I appreciate that. The other thing, we actually had a peer-led sexual assault group long before I got here and before there were professionals engaged in this work at Wake Forest. And so that group has been terrific partners. But one of our greatest successes has been moving our peer education to the bystander education approach. To teach people that those skills that are engaged in noticing something, determining it's a problem, believing that you have a role in that, and giving you tools then to work through that. And we use bystander as a platform now, not only for our sexual assault education, but for our mental health prevention education and our alcohol education. And so creating that common set of skills about what it means to believe that you have an ownership stake in the campus community through your own voice is, I think, one of our big successes. Great,
thank you. We have another question from the folks on the phone, so I'm going to try to do this. Sandra, you had a question, just a couple comments back about your Title IX office. Are you able to voice that to Dr. Rue directly?
Sure. My question is just basically, how do you work with that office when our job, at least our method of doing our job is student support, but our Title IX office seems to only view their role as preventing the university from being sued, to the point that students are now telling each other, never go to Title IX. They don't care. They won't do it. They won't investigate. They'll just, make it worse for you.
Wow, well, that's hard to hear. I can tell you that the roles of Title IX professionals and advocates are they're different roles, and so they're not a natural partnership. In the working, I sometimes play a little bit of a marriage counselor role between them, given their different viewpoints. On our campus, both of them do report to me, at least dotted line to me. So, I've got a good positionality for that. Sometimes if Title IX reports to another VP entirely, it's a little more challenging. But I will say that they both care about prevention. And I found the common ground in working towards getting out in front of this issue and creating a joint approach to the prevention work. But it is relationship building of the most important type, and so it's not fast. But I did find that cultural respect helped us provide a framework that brought those people together in a more collaborative way than is often the case on a campus.
That relationship building is so key, and I think it's not without its energy expenditures. I mean, you have to really work at it, but I think it is just so critical when it comes to getting everybody on the same page for this work and kind of realizing that you're all working towards the same end goal. It can be challenging, of course, when we're all coming from different offices and different departments and what have you, but we want to be moving the institution together forward as one. So that is very key. So we probably have time for one more question from folks who are listening. I'm going to give folks a minute to type something in if they have one, or let us know if they have a question. And I'm going to just pose one in the meantime for Dr. Rue. And this is maybe a little aspirational, but that's okay. It's a Monday morning and it's rainy here in Washington, D.C., so a little positive thinking is not the worst thing in the world. But I'm curious where you see this issue being in 5 or 10 years from now. What are you hopeful is kind of the norm, whether it's on campuses or kind of writ large? Where do you hope we're going to be able to get to in 5 or 10 years?
Well, I'm not hopeful about the United States Senate, but I do think what's happening in business and industry is pretty interesting. There are a lot of activist boards now that are looking to root out sexual assault from within their own culture. They realize from a fiduciary standpoint, it's a risk to the organization. So that's a whole new set of partners that a year ago we didn't have. And they're powerful players. So I think that's something that's on the horizon, that governing boards of privately held companies are looking for those kinds of statements and zero tolerance policies. So that's going to help our students, I think. I do find that students today have greater knowledge about what constitutes sexual assault. Doesn't mean they all always turn that into action. So I think that means our K-12 folks have been doing good work. I do think that issues of relationship violence are more pernicious. I think it's harder for folks to understand the entanglement embedded in relationship violence. And since October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month, it behooves us all to really be thinking about those issues. People get themselves entangled and enmeshed in unhealthy relationships and that are very hard to get out of. And so I think there's a lot of work to be done in that area. I'll say one other thing, we're using our Culture of Respect leadership team as a form of civic engagement. So when the Department of Education puts forth its new regulations, which are apparently imminent, we're going to use that team to also help our students and others provide feedback through the official governmental notice of proposed rulemaking process to help people understand how they can be active citizenships. And we think the recent hearings have provided even more motivations for citizens to tell government what matters to them.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think I'm glad to see you're taking an overall optimistic view on this, because I certainly am trying to, but it's nice to know that there's other champions in the field who see us moving in this direction. So we're going to have one last short question. I know this is going to be maybe a big one to bite off in a short amount of time, but I want to be mindful of people's time. Dennis, I'm going to go ahead and take you off mute, and if you want to pose your question, because it sounds like something that a couple people asked about, go ahead. You should be able to speak now.
Yeah, this is actually a question from all of us here at East Carolina University, wondering how do you approach this work from a cultural sensitivity lens, Dr. Rue?
Thank you, Dennis. I appreciate that question. This is where our student partners are so important to us as well. We do know that issues of sexual misconduct play out differently in different cultures, and we want to make sure that our efforts are targeted in ways that make the most sense to our students. So that's an important aspect of the student involvement piece. We also ourselves try to make sure we're educated, read widely in the literature so that we're up to speed.
Yeah, that's a great point. Well, give me 1 second here while I try to navigate tech, which is always fun for me. But I want to end today by first and foremost thanking Dr. Rue for her time. I know there's a lot of colleagues in the field who very much respect your work, respect the legacy that you're leaving at Wake Forest, and we're interested to hear from you on this issue. So thank you for your time and your thoughtful perspectives on that. I also know that there was folks who were interested in hearing a little bit more about what you talked about with your work with Culture of Respect. So I wanted to let folks know that if they do want to get involved, we're actually accepting applicants for our third cohort. The application is open now and available now, and the deadline is October 31st. So that is coming up quickly, but it is a very manageable application. So if that's something you're interested in, we would highly encourage you to reach out to myself or to Dr. Rue if you have questions about her experience. Cerise is putting some helpful links into the chat right now for folks who are interested, but I'm happy to speak with anyone one-on-one who'd like to hear more about this, and we will send a follow-up email after this discussion with some more information so you don't have to copy down all of those links right this second. But again, I want to thank Dr. Rue and her team, who are phenomenal. I mean, absolutely, you just have the best team over there, so I don't want to leave them out of this. Thank you for your time, and thank you all for joining us and for the work that you do on your campuses. We know that you are passionate, as passionate about ending sexual violence on campus as we are, so we appreciate all that you do. Thank you very much, everyone, and if you would like to receive any information from us directly, go ahead and put a +1 in the chat just real quickly, and we'll make sure that we reach out to you directly, but we will follow up with everyone. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a nice day.